Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Today's notes are probably going to be a little bit longer. We're going to be covering triangle congruences. For two triangles that are congruent, if and only if their corresponding sides and corresponding angles are congruent. So remember, corresponding means they're in the same spot. Two triangles can be corresponding, and one can have a different rotation or orientation from the other one, but just keep in mind they don't have to be lined up exactly the same. As long as their corresponding angles and sides are congruent, you're good. Okay, so if we look here, we have angle A is congruent to angle H, angle B is congruent to angle J, and angle C is congruent to angle K. Then we talk about our sides. We see our congruence markings here. We have AB, it's congruent to HJ. Oops, not HL, HJ. Okay, we have BC is congruent to JK. And we have CA is congruent to HK. Okay, when we say all of our angles and all our sides that are corresponding are congruent, we can say that our triangle. And so then we write a triangle, or we write a congruent statement. Now our congruent statements need to line up in the same order. So if I have ABC here, I need to write triangle HJK here. A is congruent to H. We saw that here. So we need to have them in the same exact spot. I really hope you're listening to this because this is so important. If they are written in a different order, even though they look congruent, if our congruent statement is written differently, it is not going to be congruent. So the congruent statement has to line up. Like I said, hope you heard that. Okay, so let's talk about some shortcuts here to help us with congruences. Instead of having to go through and finding 6 sets of congruent things, 3 sets of congruent angles, 3 sets of congruent sides, we can use these triangle congruence shortcuts. If I can prove that 3 pairs of corresponding sides are congruent, I can say my triangles are congruent. So I see here, I have my 3 sides congruent, and then marked here also. So I can use my triangle congruence statement saying A, B, C is congruent to triangle D, E, F. Okay, again, remember, they need to match up. Another shortcut we have is side, angle, side. 2 pairs of sides and the included angle. Included angle means it's between my 2 sides. So notice I have the side. My angle is in between my 2 sides. Okay, that's what included means. If those 3 things are congruent, then I can say my triangles are congruent. So A, B, C is congruent to triangle D, E, F. Again, I'm making sure that my things are lining up. If they don't line up in my congruence statement, my triangles are not congruent, even though they look like it. Angle, side, angle. 2 pairs of angles and now the included side. Included side means it's in between those 2 angles that are congruent, okay? If I have that, I can prove ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Again, congruent statement. Make sure things are lining up. Really hoping you're hearing this. All right, last one we have here, angle, side, angle. And we can say angle, side, angle, or we can say side, angle, angle. Both ways, forward or back is fine. This is where we have 2 angles and the non-side. So notice this time it's the side that's not in between the 2 angles that are congruent. Then we can say triangle A, B, C is congruent to triangle D, E, and F. Again, make sure my congruence statement is lining up. Okay, so let's talk about 2 that are not triangle congruences. Angle, side, side, and angle, angle, angle. These 2 cannot be proven that things are congruent. We can go through big long proof. I can do a lot of explanation and some examples for you if you want to see these. We can talk about it one-on-one. I'm not going to take the time now. just keep in mind, there's no donkeys, forwards or backwards. Take a moment to think about that. If you don't understand it, ask a neighbor who might have giggled, okay? And then there's no triple A. So no donkeys, no triple A, and then you're good. Here's some examples. So in this one, I want to know, are these two triangles congruent? Well, yes, they are congruent by side, side, side. And you can use just the 3 letters to abbreviate. That's just fine. Okay, let's look here. We only see one thing marked, or two things technically, these sides. But I know since these share a side, I can say that those are congruent. Do I have enough information here? Well, I can say things look congruent, but I can't prove that they're congruent. So I can't say that these two triangles are congruent. So there's not enough info. So no, we don't know if they're congruent. All right, here I see I have 3 different pieces of information. I have angle, I have a side, and I have another side. Notice my angle is not included. It's not in between the 2 sides. So here, this is not a congruence. This would be a donkey. We don't have donkeys. No donkeys. Okay. KM bisects angle JML. So angle JML that we see here, and if it bisects, I can mark it because bisects means it splits it into 2 even angles. So that's good. Is there other information we know? Some of you are going to say JK and KL are congruent, but we don't know that. Just because we have an angle bisector does not mean it goes to the midpoint of the side. But we do see here that it shares a side. So these 3, or it has 3 pieces of information. It talks about my angle, it has angle, and then it has a side. So yes, angle, angle, side. If you want, we can look at this like this. We have J, M, K. We have M, K, L. These angles are marked. These angles we can mark on our own. And then those. We have angle, side, angle. All right, so let's take a look here. Two are marked, but if we have a right angle here, we have a right angle here. And then they share a side, so I can mark that. My angles that are congruent are my angles, so they're the ones between the 2 sides. So we can say yes, side, angle, side. All right, let's take a look here. 2 triangles that are sharing a side, so if they share a side, I can mark it as congruent. And now I have all 3 sides that are congruent. All right, let's look here. I see they share a side, so I can mark it as congruent. In this case, it's the non-included side, so I can say yes, angle, angle, side. I go from angle, I have an angle, and then a side. So angle, angle, side. All right, let's look at these 2. Perfect, I have vertical angles, so I can mark those. And now I see some sides that are marked congruent. This is not a congruent triangle because it's marked congruent to a side within its own triangle. That is bad news. We need to know, okay? If it was this one and this one that were congruent, and this one and this one that were congruent, then we could have said yes, side angle side. But because it's congruent to itself, it doesn't work. It needs to be congruent to the other triangle. All right, so here's some practice, a little blurb here. That's a good idea to read, and we will touch base with you guys in class. See you then.